Picture this. It's 1972, and the martial arts world is about to witness something unprecedented. In a dimly lit Hollywood dojo, two legends stand face to face, but this isn't the respectful encounter history remembers. This is the story of what really happened when Bruce Lee's ego collided with Chuck Norris's quiet confidence. Bruce Lee, riding high on his newfound fame, had just finished filming Fist of Fury and believed himself invincible. His speed was legendary, his technique flawless, but success had poisoned his humility. Meanwhile, Chuck Norris, a six-time world karate champion, remained in the shadows, content with his quiet mastery, never seeking the spotlight. What started as a chance meeting would become a lesson that would echo through martial arts history. Because sometimes the loudest voice in the room isn't the strongest. Sometimes the person who has nothing to prove is the one with everything to give. And sometimes arrogance meets its match in the most unexpected way. This is that story. The year was 1972, and Bruce Lee was drunk on his own legend. Fresh off his breakthrough role in The Big Boss, he strutted through Hollywood like a man who had conquered the world. His philosophy of Jeet Kune Do was revolutionary, his one-inch punch was mythical, and his speed was unmatched. But with each magazine cover, each interview, each adoring fan, something subtle shifted in Bruce's heart. The humble student who once begged to learn Wing Chun had been replaced by a man who believed his own publicity. Traditional martial arts are obsolete, Bruce would tell anyone who'd listen. Kung Fu is the ultimate fighting system. Everything else is just dancing. Chuck Norris, meanwhile, lived in a different world entirely. The Oklahoma farm boy had quietly dominated the karate tournament circuit for years, accumulating 6 world championships without fanfare. He taught at his modest dojo in Torrance, never seeking fame, never claiming supremacy over other arts. His students respected him not because he demanded it, but because he earned it through quiet excellence and endless dedication to improvement. The two men inhabited the same martial arts universe, but moved in completely different orbits, until fate decided to bring them together. It happened at Ed Parker's International Karate Championships in Long Beach. Bruce Lee had been invited as a special guest, a rising star meant to demonstrate his revolutionary approach. Chuck Norris was there too, but as he always was, competing, not performing. After Chuck's dominant victory in the heavyweight division, Bruce approached him backstage. What should have been a meeting of mutual respect became something else entirely when Bruce's ego took control. "Impressive display," Bruce said, his voice carrying a condescending edge that made Chuck's students bristle. "But that's just karate. Pretty movements, rigid forms. In a real fight, Kung Fu would destroy karate every time." Chuck looked up from unwrapping his hands, his expression unchanged. "Is that so?" "Karate is too linear, too predictable," Bruce continued, warming to his theme. "It's like watching someone paint by numbers. Kung Fu is art, fluid, adaptive, superior in every way." The room had grown quiet. Other martial artists pretended not to listen while hanging on every word. Chuck simply nodded and continued unwrapping his hands, his silence somehow more powerful than any response. But Bruce wasn't finished. "I've studied every martial art worth studying. Karate might work against other karate practitioners, but against true Kung Fu mastery?" He shook his head dismissively. "It wouldn't even be close." Word of Bruce's challenge spread through the martial arts community like wildfire. But it was Bruce himself who kept fanning the flames. In interviews, at demonstrations, at every opportunity, he would casually mention how traditional karate had been surpassed by his revolutionary approach. "Chuck Norris is a talented athlete," Bruce told a reporter from Black Belt magazine, "but he's limited by his system. Karate teaches you to fight other karate practitioners. Jeet Kune Do teaches you to fight reality." The slight was subtle but unmistakable, and it reached Chuck's ears within days. His students were furious, demanding he defend the honor of their art, their school, their teacher, but Chuck remained maddeningly calm. "Let him talk," Chuck told his students. "A man's actions speak louder than his words." But privately, Chuck was troubled, not by the insult to his abilities, but by what he saw happening to Bruce. He remembered the hungry young man who had trained with him years earlier, before fame changed everything, that Bruce Lee had been eager to learn, quick to acknowledge others' strengths, this new Bruce seemed lost in his own reflection. Meanwhile, Bruce's inner circle began to worry. His close friend Dan Inosanto tried to counsel moderation. Bruce, Chuck Norris is no joke. Six-time world champion doesn't happen by accident. But Bruce waved off the concern. Championships in a limited system, he replied. Put him against unlimited possibilities, and we'll see what those titles are really worth. The confrontation finally came during a private gathering at Bruce's home in Bel Air. Chuck had been invited by mutual friends who hoped the two could work out their differences. Instead, Bruce saw it as an opportunity to prove his point publicly. Since you're here, Bruce announced to the assembled group of martial artists and actors, why don't we settle this question once and for all? Let's see if karate can really hang with kung fu. Chuck's mind flashed back to his childhood in Oklahoma, to countless hours spent in humble dojos, to the lessons his teachers had drilled into him. True strength doesn't need to announce itself. Real power doesn't need to prove itself to others. He thought of his sensei's words. The loudest student in the dojo is often the weakest. The one who speaks least often has the most to teach. Chuck looked around the room, saw the expectant faces, felt the weight of his art's reputation on his shoulders. But more than that, he saw an opportunity to teach, not just Bruce, but everyone present, a lesson about humility, respect, and the true nature of martial arts. All right, Chuck said quietly, let's do this. What happened next became legend, though few who were there ever spoke of it publicly out of respect for Bruce's memory. They faced off in Bruce's backyard dojo, a space filled with mirrors that would reflect every moment of what was to come. Bruce bounced on his toes, shadowboxing, talking trash with the confidence of a man who had never faced real defeat. Remember, Bruce called out to the watchers, this is what happens when an evolved art meets a primitive one. Chuck said nothing. He simply took his stance. Not the rigid tournament-style karate Bruce expected, but something flowing, adaptive. Years of study hadn't made Chuck narrow. They had made him deep. Bruce attacked first, naturally, launching into a combination that had dazzled movie audiences and demonstration crowds. His speed was exactly as advertised. Lightning fast, technically perfect. But Chuck wasn't a movie audience. He wasn't a demonstration crowd. He was a six-time world champion who had faced every style, every strategy, every type of opponent imaginable. Bruce's perfect combinations found nothing but air. His devastating kicks were neutralized by subtle shifts in distance. His famous one-inch punch was rendered harmless by angles Bruce hadn't considered. And then Chuck began to fight back. It wasn't brutal. It wasn't vicious. It was simply overwhelming. Chuck moved like water around Bruce's attacks, then struck with the precision of a surgeon. Every technique Bruce threw was countered. Every strategy was anticipated. Every assumption was proven false. The room fell silent except for the sound of breathing and the soft impact of controlled techniques. Bruce, the man who had claimed karate was predictable, found himself completely unable to predict what Chuck would do next. The artist of No Way is Way discovered that Chuck's way was far more limitless than he had ever imagined. When it was over, and it was over quickly, Bruce sat on the floor of his own dojo, not injured but utterly defeated. The mirrors that had been meant to multiply his triumph instead reflected his humiliation from every angle. But Chuck did something unexpected. He extended his hand to help Bruce up. Your kung fu is impressive, Chuck said quietly. But maybe the problem isn't with karate or kung fu. Maybe the problem is thinking any one art has all the answers. The room remained silent as Bruce accepted Chuck's hand. For the first time in months, maybe years, Bruce Lee looked genuinely humbled. The mask of arrogance cracked, and underneath his friends could see glimpses of the man they remembered. The seeker, the student, the humble martial artist who had once been hungry to learn from anyone willing to teach. I underestimated you, Bruce admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. You underestimated karate, Chuck replied. But more than that, you overestimated the importance of being right. In the weeks that followed, Bruce Lee was a changed man. He stopped making pronouncements about the superiority of his art. He began seeking out practitioners of different styles again, not to prove them wrong, but to learn from them. The collaboration that would later produce Way of the Dragon, where Chuck and Bruce fought as respectful opponents, grew from the seeds planted that night in Bel Air. Chuck never spoke publicly about what happened, despite endless questions from reporters and martial artists. When pressed, he would simply say, "Bruce Lee was a great martial artist and a good man. We learned from each other." But those who were there that night learned something profound. True mastery isn't about proving your art is superior to all others. It's about understanding that every art, every teacher, every opponent has something to offer if you're humble enough to receive it. The loudest voice in the room is rarely the wisest. The person who claims to have nothing left to learn has usually learned the least. And sometimes the greatest victory isn't in proving you're right, but in discovering you were wrong and growing from that discovery. Bruce Lee went on to become a legend, but the greatest chapter of that legend wasn't written in his movies or his demonstrations. It was written in a moment of defeat that taught him the difference between confidence and arrogance, between mastery and ego. Because in the end, the strongest people are often the quietest ones, and the most dangerous opponent is the one who has nothing to prove.